University community partnerships have immense potential, but they're often difficult to get right. Power imbalances, mismatched goals, and a lack of trust can derail even the best of intentions. When these partnerships fail, both communities and universities miss out on opportunities for meaningful impacts. In today's episode, Roger and I speak with Toye Watson, the Director of Community Impact at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, to talk about how nonprofit leaders and university staff members can work together to navigate some of these challenges. Whether you're a nonprofit or public sector leader looking to engage with a university, or maybe you're a university staff member or professor who's aiming to build trust with the community and work with a nonprofit, this conversation offers practical takeaways for creating partnerships that truly work.
I think that as we move forward, especially in lieu of what has happened recently in our social stratosphere and our political stratosphere, that communities are looking less and less towards people inside of our federal or state or local municipalities for the sole answers. They want to be collaborators inside of it, right? Because they want things to be done with them, not for them, and they would love to have their voices heard. And because people are tapped into that type of way, and I think it's just going to increase as we move forward, they are going to demand it. And so if you want to do good business, you're looking for the communities that you want to do those businesses with to give you their input. So I think it's customer service. I think it's strategic thinking, but I also think that it's holistic in the way that we operate as larger entities, whether that be UNC Charlotte, the state or the federal government. We're supposed to be by and for the people. So in order to create an ecosystem, we got to have those people that say so inside of it. What does not work? Ignoring people. um, Having I'm going to do it anyway kind of mentality, right? Like we have the bond money, or we have this particular scholarship, or we have this grant. And regardless of what the community would want, we have this push forward mentality. And I think that we have to stop and have conversations with people, and being okay with those conversations being uncomfortable. And the reason why I say the uncomfortability is because of the way things or those entities have interacted with us in the past. Um, we know just from history, just a quick little research, that universities or large institutions have not always held the community's opinions or their livelihood in great regard or in revere, especially if we have private investment for whatever we're trying to do. So we have that history that we have to overcome. We have a strong racial bias history as well as a cultural bias history that we have to overcome. And so having those communications at the very beginning allows you to establish trust. And the only way that you can establish trust is to be trustworthy. And I think that atonement is the right way. I acknowledge that I come into this space and I'm representing an entity that might have done some harm. This is not my intention. And here are my intentions. And what do you think about those intentions? So the wrong way is not listening. And the wrong way would be not being prepared for some uncomfortable conversations that could lead to something that was a fruitful connection if you would just have it.
Toye, we have had the opportunity. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, by the way. I definitely appreciate your wisdom and your perspective on community work. I've had the great pleasure and opportunity to work beside you over these past few years now, particularly with the Quarters of Opportunities initiative at UNC Charlotte through urbanCORE. And I definitely have an affinity for you. You are such an inspiration, all your work. You have worn many hats throughout your lifetime. Not only are you one of the few native Charlotteans who we have on the pod, who we've had on the podcast, but just in general. But you have, my goodness, you have served in so many capacities as an educator, as a program director, community organizer, a grant writer. And I believe that back in 2017, you were the recipient of the MECED Teacher of Excellence Award. So, you have had an extensive CV, a resume if you could tell us a little bit, though, about your work right now, the work that you are engaging with through urbanCORE. So tell us a little bit about your work at urbanCORE.
Well, UNC Charlotte has always had an extensive relationship with the community. What we embarked on, and I'm using the royal we as though I am the entity. Apologies. What UNC Charlotte wanted to embark on is ways to deeply engage the community in a way or at a depth that perhaps would cause us to be a little bit more closer. As the corridors of opportunities were starting to begin, we thought about how could we take engaged scholarship to the next level. Well, the best way is to build an ecosystem. So urbanCORE, the core stands for community-oriented research and engagement. And so we hired my assistant provost. His name is Dr. Byron White. He has worked extensively in that regard. And so they brought him on board to help with the Three Sisters Market. This was an initiative in the West Side to help bring to the finish line our food solution in a place that had been a food desert for decades. They used his ability to kind of coalition build. And by that, I mean, take researchers, faculty who are experts in their field, but also have them understand, if they didn't already understand, that you are brilliant in all the things that you do in engagement with that type of research. But these people in this community also have lived experiences that are on par with your master's and your PhD. Let's join forces, and I'm going to age myself, so I'm going to try to do it for every generation. Let's join forces and form Voltron for my generation. And for the younger ones, they're going to mighty morph into the when they mighty morph for the Power Rangers. You know, when they become that.
Voltron, man, we got a shout out throwback to the 80s most incredible cartoon ever made, probably Voltron. Real quick, I didn't mean to interrupt. I had to throw it in here. We're going to talk about Voltron for a quick second. They're actually trying to make a movie, like a live action movie. Yes, that's what I heard. Henry Cavill, I think is his last name, who was Superman, is supposed to be a big part of that. So anyway, you heard it here on the Common Good Data Podcast, breaking news. Continue.
Listen, the kids nowadays would know Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And basically I'm bringing that up as a metaphor to say that we're strong individually, right? But when we combine together, things are going to happen that are major. We're going to win. And so just like that, he helped to form a coalition with the West Side a neighborhood association with Ricky, and as well as a group of wonderful faculty that helped to bring that thing to the finish line. And so at the end of their collaboration, they came up with a report, used that report as a lure to get, and I always call it a lure, right? You already have the bait. We're just going to put a little extra lure on there to get the city and the county right on board to say, hey, this is something that the community not only needs and deserves. And there's a public health criteria that we want to make sure that's minimal for our Charlotteans. So let's bring this aboard. They basically got a community-owned food solution. It's going to be called the Three Sisters Market. And so with that in mind, that's what we do at urbanCORE. We combine forces. We go out and get educators and faculty such as yourself, Roger, that are not only familiar with communities, but love those communities. And they want to facilitate a solution that the community says, this is what we need to get over the hump. Basically, it's for us to live our best lives. And so we just wrapped up Sugar Creek. Theirs was a community wellness anchor. And we're entering into the Central Avenue area. And we're trying to form about what that's going to be. But basically, that's what urbanCORE does. We bridge the community along with what we do at the school with our faculty, our students, and our volunteer services. And we create a bubble where we're helping and trusting and loving each other. And we create a solution that can be sustainable for the community for the future.
I love the Voltron example. And for me, I'll date myself here because I was thinking of Captain Planet, like with my powers combined.
The power
Captain Planet, This is great. Hey, I got a quick question for you. Have you ever thought, I'm drowning in Excel sheets, or my boss needs a report and so does the funder, or are we actually making an impact? Well, if any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Nonprofit professionals are under immense pressure. Juggling data, outcomes, and reports, it can be overwhelming. That's why I created The Strategist, The Analyst, and The Storyteller, a series of courses designed to help you use data to build sustainable programs and lead with confidence. You'll learn how to make data work for you and not against you. And with the data you need at your fingertips, you'll be able to gain clarity in your work, demonstrate your impact, and secure the long-term funding that your organization needs to thrive. These courses are perfect for executive directors, program staff, and anyone ready to build a data-driven leadership skills in the social sector. Visit commongooddata.com/courses to get started. Our next question focuses on 2 to 3 things that you think make partnerships successful. But I want to dig into it because you mentioned, themes of like of atonement, of acknowledging the power differential between universities and communities, and focus on trust. But can you maybe I feel like when I talk to universities, you'll always hear that language, or at least something like it from university. And yet sometimes things still kind of break down a little bit. And so I'm curious about, what have you noticed, or maybe you could share some specific examples of where either the community side or the university tried to make that happen, but something didn't work out, and maybe why that happened.
Okay, I'll tell this for Byron. He gives this really good story. When he first was meeting up with the West Side with their coalition with Ricky Hall, he said that they first want to do some canvassing, and they wanted to collect a lot of information, like a lot of background on what's going on, a lot of qualitative data. And so as they were starting to embark on those first conversations to identify some of the solutions that they might partake on, a gentleman by the name of Reggie Singleton. He also works for the county, but he is the CEO of a Mills Place. Was like, well, who's going to own this? Who will own this information? And he said that Byron and the faculty were taken aback by that. What do you mean own? Who's going to own the data? Who's going to be able to report on it? Who's going to do the research? Where would this lie? And how can the community be a part of that? And they had never been asked that question before. And so before they made any other move, they had to figure out, how are we going to co-own all of this information? How is the community going to have capacity built so they can not only be a part of the publishing, but when is it going to be published? How is it going to be reported on? They wanted say so. So they created an MOU that spelled out all those things. That was needed for them to move forward. And then after they got it, here comes Ricky Hall with this stack of all this qualitative measurements that they had been collecting for years on everything that they already needed to move it forward. So they didn't even have to do that part. But that trust had to be established, and the trust that was established through the MOU. I'll give you another example with the Sugar Creek corridor. They wanted us to know that Hidden Valley, that community, is not what the media says that it is. It is full of people who are owners, renters, Black, Latin, and others who love this community, who love those kids, and they want to see it prosper. And so in order for us to establish trust, we did this little community assets mapping session where people talked about their memories, what they remember about this place, what they hope for the place. And we actually, with me driving, God bless everybody's souls, because I drove that van, bumping around I-85 and actually laying our hands and getting out of the van and walking on these places that had people's context and memories attached to them. So that's some of the things. It's trust. Trust is usually the thing that people have to get over. And I think each community is going to have a different thing or way that you establish trust. But it's always that one thing that kind of grounds us and allows us to move forward.
Toye, I really appreciate that perspective again that you keep bringing in regards to community collaboration, and also honoring the knowledge and wisdom that community members have, that they've accumulated over the years. And as somebody who is a representative of the university, I know that I have to always keep that in mind when I go into community spaces. I am being invited into somebody's home. And when I mean home, not literal, and it could be literal, but their community is their home. They know the ins and outs of their community. They know everything from the roots all the way up to what's grown, right? So just because I may have read an article, perhaps even published an article on a particular region or community, doesn't mean that I fully know that community like that individual or those individuals who live in the community, how they know it. So I'm so appreciative that I've gotten the chance now twice. This is my second time to be part of the Corridors of Opportunities and working alongside you to really be focal on the importance of honoring the community and also recognizing that they are also researchers of their own community. They've been researchers all their lives of their community. So they have more knowledge about their community than I would ever have. And so that's definitely been one of my takeaways. So at urbanCORE, there are many partnerships that are linked to the university resources, including research and evaluation, for organizations to be able to, learn more about what that process feels like and looks like. For our nonprofit organizations out there who are looking to build partnerships with an institution, with a university, what could you tell them? What can universities offer to help these organizations do work within the community?
I think the first thing that they should do is really know the data of their community. I think we underestimate how powerful and um how much, and I mean the cost of it, both metaphorically and literally, of data. The data tells the story of your community, where it's been, where it's going, where it has the potential to be when it comes to our government, investors, and then people who just are invested in it for the education or just for themselves, right? And so, if I were a nonprofit, the first place that I would start is the data, really knowing quantitatively this community. When did it bridge? When did it come about? How long ago at that? We found out through ours that Hidden Valley started as a farm, like a group of farms, right? Dating back to like the late 1800s. And then knowing that Sugar Creek and what we know today as North Tryon were trading routes that people were on. So go back that far and understand it from the beginning to the end. Racial demographics, financial demographics. Has it been kind of, deserted? Have the people in there been marginalized? Know everything about it data wise. And then add flesh to those bones with the qualitative data. Now that I know the story, now let me put faces to that. Going to the schools, and I would always tell them to volunteer. Places of faith, letting them know that you're willing to volunteer and you're willing to be around. And then I would also say, when it comes to fleshing it, having people there in your nonprofit that looks and has the same cultural representation of the people that you're trying to interact with. Because you're a cultural outsider. I'm from Charlotte, but I'm a third generation Charlottean, right? My grandmother was born in Charlotte, 1924. But I did not grow up in East Charlotte, where the current mall is, right? So, where Eastland Mall used to be. So there are some cultural aspects that I don't know about that area. So I have to invite people who have that information to it. I would do the same thing if I was a nonprofit. Invite people that look and know about that area to come along with me on my journey, and then add that qualitative data to it. Then, once I know all my data, I would reach out to those communities to see, well, hey, what's something that you've been trying to really wrap your mind around that could be something that could be helpful for your community? Is it education? Is it health? What are those things? And then I would form programmatic elements with their assistance around it. Once I do that, I would then contact the university about some co-publishing opportunities or opportunities to collaborate. Roger, I will contact you about social work. I have these students who are that just got here. They're new arrivals. They're of Latin American descent, specifically Central America. They might have had some trauma, or do you have some information on how I could assist them? I would do it that way. Just going on our great website, charlotte.edu, big shouts, and then typing in some professor's name or typing in a topic to see if they have someone who has been publishing that work on it. Because if they're publishing work on it, that's their research, that's their cornerstone. They'll want to do more, and they'll be actively working with you to see about some opportunities to fund some things if that's a possibility, or to continue further research on it. That's what I would do. Learn it, quantitative, get it the face to it, qualitative, and then build some programming around what the community says, and then reach out to professors or faculty directly. And then if you can't get in contact with them, type in those staff members, because we're constantly wanting to collaborate with the community.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think another big piece to keep in mind for nonprofit leaders is as much as the community members are experts of their own community, nonprofit leaders also have expertise, right, to bring to the table. So just because there may be a possible collaboration with a university or a professor or a researcher at the university doesn't make that individual, quote unquote, the lead. There is shared, quote unquote, wealth here, if that makes sense, and not to always default to academia to be the leader of a particular project, a particular initiative. It could definitely be the nonprofit leader. It could be a community member, right? So just making sure that folks understand and acknowledge that.
I want to say something about the landscape of new nonprofit leaders. One of our alumnus, Trinavia Montgomery, she's over caring. She's a researcher herself. I think what we have to do in the university side is understand the level of sophistication that we're working with in regards to new nonprofit leaders as well as communities. They're very wise, and they are understanding the value of what they bring to the table, those lived experiences as well. So we're in the predicament, and when I say I mean the university, we're in the predicament to ask rather than being requested upon, right? And then also understanding that a lot of times when I'm talking to nonprofit leaders, I'm talking to researchers. Their bread and butter when they were in school or when they did their work was in research. And so they know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a broader impact statement. They know exactly what's happening when it comes to funding and opportunities. So it would behoove us to make sure that we know that these are experts. Lived experience makes them experts, as well as those who run nonprofits that probably are researchers themselves.
Yes, I know that our professors here at UNC Charlotte in the School of Social Work will be very happy to hear that we are pushing that agenda of making sure that our nonprofit leaders who are graduates from our program are utilizing their research, evaluation, and advocacy for betterment skills. So,
but those people keep you on your toes, right? Like, people talk about running game. Like, you can't when someone is an expert, right? And so, especially when they're an expert of their lived experiences, some of our elders in our community, it would behoove you to understand that they are experts. I'm just sending out a warning. Like, if you don't know about them and know what they've done and know what the community is about, you will get a real quick history lesson.
So great examples here. And I wanted to follow up on something that I've been curious about, but we didn't talk about prior to this episode. We're in this conversation, we're thinking a lot about kind of in the community and talking about nonprofits, but a key player in these conversations too is local government. And I think a lot of the times UNCC as positions itself as kind of a leading research institution in Charlotte. And I know there's many universities there as well, but kind of positions itself that way. But even not just for UNCC, but for any university across the city, what is different about a community partnership with maybe a local nonprofit or a community organization versus a partnership with, for example, city government or county government, where researchers are kind of working with public sector entities? What's different about those relationships, and kind of how might that be, or how might you have to approach things a little bit differently in a context like that, whether you're coming from the public sector side or the university side?
I think usually when it's coming from the public sector, they are contacting us and they already know exactly the way in which they want us to operate, right? They know that they might need and I'm going to say it the way I mean it, the legitimacy of research, right? Current research, right? They could have something that could be dated. A lot of times our public entities have information that kind of lags behind. just because of the nature of data collection. And so they know that the university's job, especially ones that are R1 or in the process of becoming R1, are striving to always keep that data on as up to date as possible. So usually when public sectors contact us, they know exactly the role that they would like for us to play, and we're kind of in negotiations of what that would look like. I think when it comes to the community, it's more of a curiosity. What kind of role are they comfortable with us playing? Um, and I say that with the comfortability is of utmost importance, because the richest data that you'll ever get is when the community is informed and on your side, and they really want to collaborate with you. And I think that uh, the richness of the data to me is richer from the community portion of it, and I'll just tell you why. Because it's allowed to unfold naturally rather than this process. It doesn't have to be with the public entity, but it often is. This is what we want you to do. This is the way we see you doing it. Here's a way that we can co-benefit from it. With the community, it's very much like a dance, right? A little bachata. You got to know the steps. And so they will slow you down or speed you up compared to what they would like to do. And so it's so rich in how fast or slow they want you to go, how in depth they'll go, if they're going to really tell you about the conflict that happens in their community, especially if it's cultural conflict. It's so much more rich. So I think the public entities, when we interact or interface, we kind of know what it's going to be, right? It might shape up to be something. But with the community, it's a gray area. But the gray area leads to so much color as you are interacting with them. So I think that's the biggest difference is you don't know with the community. And as you start to build relationship and build bridges, it unfolds in a way that I think adds to the depth of what you'll learn.
It's about trust. It's about trust, and also it's about vulnerability. Mm-hmm. How, as a institution, right, the researchers, academia, et cetera, nonprofit leaders, how much vulnerability are they willing to give, right? Because there's an expectation of receiving vulnerability from people in the community, but it is a two-way street. Vulnerability does not go just one way. There has to be reciprocity in the act of being vulnerable. And so that's really important concepts that you just talked about and I love the metaphor of the dance, right? The bachata, the trust in making sure that both individuals are trusting each other. Maybe one person's going to take the lead a little bit, and then maybe the other person's going to take the lead a little bit, but it's that mutual trust and recognition.
And the emphasis on being okay with stepping on shoes. Like, when you're learning to dance, you're going to step on shoes if you don't know. Sometimes we're so afraid, and by we, I mean sometimes staff and faculty, we could be so afraid of stepping on some toes. But I think those are the most in-depth learning experience. When you do step on your toes, now you've learned for sure what the dance steps are, right? So you don't make the same mistake. Or if you do, it's still okay. It didn't destroy the dance, right? You still have an opportunity to engage in those steps.
So let's get concrete for a minute. I'd love to talk about the Three Sisters Market. You mentioned it earlier in our conversation, this community-owned food cooperative in West Charlotte. So can you talk a little bit, just walk through the steps? How did urbanCORE support this effort? And what did that partnership look like? Or to maybe use the word of unfolding, how did it unfold so that our listeners can get a good sense of how that project started and came together?
Well, that community is embodiment of a resilience. They've known for a while that there was no grocery store for probably a 10-mile radius around that area, north, south, east, or west. They also know what that type of disinvestment has done to their community. It's limited their food choices and their supply. They know that it is a public health risk to have it where there's no fresh fruits and vegetables or access to fresh meats are what that does to a community, how it devastates them. They also knew that entities would not pass from, wouldn't consider that area. And I think with the community, the only thing that they were missing is the kind of the concrete Why? Why has it been where a local grocer, a Harris Teeter, Aldi, someone, why not make it in this area when you see there's such a high demand? And I think that's where the university came into. They already knew the impact of it. They needed something very serious about what it does. And then how do we get to a solution that is going to be agreed upon that shares power? I think that's one of the things that they talked about. So, of course, they brought in my assistant provost, Dr. Byron White, because he has that ability to build those type of bridges. And he was very selective about who was going to be on the team. It was led by Dr. Colleen Hammelman, and she is an expert in the public sector, public health sector around what those type of things do to communities. So they built a team. The team included public health, financier from our school, an architect from that. So someone from the School of Architecture, someone from the School of Public Health, all those entities combined together to create this report. The report focused on the history of that area. It gave context around what was missing and what it had the potential to do if it was built. And then it went into extensively about what the community said they wanted. And then I think the great thing about that report is that it started to get into the logistics of how we could do it. Um, Before they got to that, they did extensive research. They talked to the gentleman that owns Compare Foods. They talked to other food or co-ops. Why can't it be a Food Line? Why can't it be a Harris Teeter? Talking to those entities specifically. And then afterwards, they were saying, well, it shouldn't be any of those things. It should be a co-op. The community should have an opportunity to own it and learn and build an entrepreneurial ecosystem around it. So not just the food solution, but a community solution that solved a lot of problems in this one area. And so once they decided that's what that's going to be, now they needed the way it was going to look. Our School of Architecture were really good about drawing up some mock-ups, how it was going to help and achieve the public health risk that was going on. They did that. And then the finances to the T, how much is it going to cost? And then really leaning in our public sector to be responsible for doing this, right? Since our community kind of disinvested, how do we reinvest and shore up trust and help this sector of Charlotte that is suffering in regards to this lack? And how do we make sure that we closed our arms around it? And that's what that report did. It gave you in black and white. Here's the past. Here's the narrative. Here's what we could do. This is how much it's going to cost. And it kind of put, I believe, our public sector on notice to say no. What would that mean? To not do it, what would that look like? And I think that everybody knew the cost. So it was an emphatic yes. And they've raised over $6 million using that. So what urbanCORE does is, the community is already the fishermen. They've had their reels and they've had their fishing poles for years. What we've done, what we'll do is we add a little bit of bait. Maybe you need something that's shiny and sparkling in the water that can bring more fish or the big fish to it. We're not the hook. We're certainly just a little sparkly piece inside of the water that would bring the big fish to it. So that would help you get where you need it to be. So we are in service too. We're not the code. We're just helping. I would say we're one of the coders, right? We add a little algorithm to shake things down so we can get what we want. And I think that's what urbanCORE brings to the situation. What we brought to the Three Sisters Market. We were just a little piece that helped lure in the big fish.
I love it. We talked about some cartoons earlier, and now we're talking mathematics. Excellent. Look at that. We've covered a lot of ground here, and the one thing that keeps resonating in my head as I hear you throughout our conversation is the importance of bridge building, right? And how it does take time and patience to build a strong bridge. Think about the concept. I'm not an architect or an engineer, but I'm imagining that if you build a bridge, you definitely, one, you want to take your time. Two, you want to make sure that all the pieces are fitting in together structurally, in a way that it's not gonna fall. But you're also putting in a recognition of, if there are some gaps, we can easily go back and rework those things. So I that's what I've been thinking about throughout our conversation, is the concept of bridge building. So, oof. All right, a lot of good stuff, Drew. A lot of great stuff.
Yeah, it's true, Roger. I think it's time to talk some culture, man.
Oh, wow.
What we got today?
Woof. All right. So I was going left, and then I decided to go right, and then I decided to go up, and then I decided to go down. I didn't know which way to go with this, because there's just so many different things that went through my head. But so we talked about early 80s cartoon with Voltron and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And then Drew had to throw in an old school, Captain Planet. So I'm gonna reverse, and I'm actually going. So we're in the holiday season, or coming up. The holiday season's upon us now, and I'm gonna go with music. I was gonna go with movies, but I'm gonna go with music. What today's pop culture 80s 90s sort of concept, trivia, thought, however you want to call it, it's going to revolve around music. What 80s 90s song reminds you, like when you hear it, it takes you back to that time? It's like when you hear that, like today, if you were to hear it, you could go back into that, like whatever time it was in your life in the 80s and 90s, and be like, oh man, it seemed like it was yesterday. I'll start us out. All right. I'm going to go way, way, way old school. I had a couple of choices, but I'm going with a classic. I might have mentioned this before. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before on this podcast, but Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis, 1987. It's a classic song, partly because I was born in New York. I was born in New York City, and moving down here in 1985, and then hearing that song as I lived in North Carolina was a connection for me. So whenever I hear it now, it takes me back to that time when I would hear it on the radio, or it was on MTV, and it's just holds a special place in my heart. Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis. Drew goes next. You get to go last. Drew goes next. So we get you another couple minutes to think about that one. Man. So Drew goes next.
Man, it's always tough to kind of think of like a song on the spot, but I think I got one here. I was listening to, I'm trying to remember when this song would have come out. I think it's a 90s song. Let's see here. I'm looking it up real quick. It's a song. Yeah. 1998. So, You Get What You Give from New Radicals, which is, I just brings me back to kind of that like late 90s time. And I was thinking about, I don't know how much when you read the lyrics of a song, like what its intentional purpose was, but I always love the overall line of "You get what you give" as a great metaphor for some of the partnership stuff that we're talking about here. And it's kind of like how, and this is true for nonprofits, for universities, for anybody, that what you kind of, to walk into those partnerships from a disposition of what can you give instead of what can you get, I think can sometimes be a really important reframing before you walk into a room. So anyways, you get what you give, New Radicals.
Before you go, Toye, I'm gonna connect my song. Actually, now that I heard you say that, Drew, real quick.
Yeah.
If you think about the lyrics of Run DMC's song Christmas in Hollis, really is a perspective of, this is what Christmas looked like in our neighborhood. It's not the same everywhere else. And it's sort of looking at the perspective of, this is how our community celebrated Christmas, right, at that time. So, Christmas in Hollis looks a lot different than Christmas in, I don't know, Charlotte, North Carolina, or the different neighborhoods in Charlotte, North Carolina, right? So it's, if we're tying it into this perspective of community building and community initiatives and like leaning in on the community, I want to do that. I want to tie that perspective from that song to, this is how it's done in our neighborhood, in our hood.
Yeah, that's a good way of tying that together. I think it's real appropriate. Well done. We're tying these themes together right here at the end of the episode, Roger. I love it.
Y'all sound so deep. And mine is going to go in the complete opposite direction.
Go for it.
As a child of the 90s who went to the skating ring, I'm throwing it way back in Charlotte off of Old Pineville Road. It used to be a skating ring out there. And they would take off your skates, and it would be the largest dance floor in Charlotte. Anywho, it was this song. It's called 12 Ghetto Days of Christmas by Quad DJ. And they had the guys saying what they want for the 12 day of Christmas, but the girls had their part. And I would always say it. So it starts off like Christmas Day, the Perp of the Christ. No doubt, that's what it's all about. Let me here stop the beat for a sec. Show some respect. And then she goes down this whole list of what she wants for Christmas. And the number one was a man with a lot of money. And that song on, like if I'm in a car, if I'm with my poor kids, got to do a little slight twerk because got to keep it. But that's that Quad City DJs 12 Ghetto Days of Christmas. Go and listen to that and tell me you don't do a slight twerk with everything says they want for Christmas. But yeah, they start off by acknowledging that what Christmas is about. They go into exactly what they want. So
there you go. Shout out to Quad City DJs. Oh man, only here on the Common Good Data podcast.
Toye, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with the audience to talk a little bit about, community partnership, your work at urbanCORE. If folks want to get in touch with you and learn more, how can they do that?
Please, reach me at, and this is the LinkedIn, Toye Watson. That's the best way to get into me. And if not, just go on urbanCORE. It has my UNC Charlotte email address. It's tnesmith@charlotte.edu. Large respect to you guys. This is a beautiful thing that you're doing, and contact me any way that you can. It's not a lot of girls named Toye. So you'll Google me and there I am. Either through our email, which I check all the time, or through LinkedIn. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity.